Morning folks, I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School. Welcome back to another video in our series on Materia Medica. The plant we're going to talk about today is called the curly dock, also known as the yellow dock. It's got a couple other names as well, but it's in the Rumex family. And the curly dock is probably one of the most prevalent plants around here. And don't confuse that with burdock, because they interact well together as far as medicinal preparations go, but they do different things, and they're not in the same family. Okay, so it's not burdock. This is a yellow dock or curly dock. Now, this is another plant like the mullein that's very easy to identify from this shooting stalk that comes up to 6 feet high in the center of the second year plant. You can see that this one's now turned brown. The leaves are fairly wilted, and this plant's dying off, and that's because it's already bloomed and it's on its second year, so now it's dying back. And it's very easy to recognize in its second year because you can see these stalks from a long ways off. But your first year plant and the root are the best medicine. So we're going to try to find a good first year plant to talk about the medicinal properties of the curly dock or yellow dock. Stay with me. I wanted to shoot a little bit of a close-up view here for you guys so you can see what the structure of this plant looks like in this spike that comes up from the ground here. And you can see a little bit about what the leaves look like. They generally have this reddish color going down the center of the leaf a little bit. A lot of times they're twisted like this one is, which is another reason they call it a curly dock, because they get a twisted leaf like that. You'll see that a lot better when we find a younger plant. Okay, so what we have here is a first year curly dock plant. And you can see that most of the leaves are turning over and they're curly. They grow up in a spiral and curl like that. They have some red in them in places. The more mature they get and the older they get, the more red they get in that vein that runs down the middle of the leaf like that. Let's talk about the medicinal uses of this plant. One medicinal use for this plant that we can readily use on the fly is that it is one of the best things to treat stinging nettle stings. So you can just pull the leaves off of here and rub the affected area. It's not probably as good as plantain, which we'll talk about in another video, but it is very good for that, and that's an old-time folk remedy for stinging nettle, is the curly dock. And the curly dock generally grows in places where stinging nettle grows, just like jewelweed grows in places where poison ivy grows. Same thing. All right, so that's one quick and dirty. Now, the other side of this coin is that we talked yesterday about the black walnut being very astringent and having a binding effect because it was an astringent to the 3rd degree. Now, this plant is somewhat astringent. It's an astringent to the 1st degree, which means it's okay for topical use and things like that. But it's actually a laxative when you take it internally and you make some type of a tea or infusion, mainly from the roots. The leaves will work, but the roots are much better for that. And this plant is a detoxifying type plant in a lot of ways and works really good in conjunction with plants like burdock, like I said before. But it is a liver affiliated plant. It has a direct affinity to the liver, the gallbladder, and things like that, and it helps to secrete bile. It helps make your body secrete bile, which cleanses and detoxifies your body through the liver. So this is a good tonic type infusion as well. But the rootstock itself makes the best infusion or decoction, depending on whether you're harvesting the leaves or harvesting that root and using it right away or drying it. If you dry it, you really need to decoct it. If you harvest them fresh, you can get away with the infusion. And when you drink that liquid, it will work as a mild laxative. It's not going to just make you, crap through a screen door, but it will work as a mild laxative. And that is one of the really good uses of this dock plant, this curly dock, is as a laxative. So really your two main things for on the fly in the field are use for stinging nettles, use for topical wound care, and use for a laxative, a gentle laxative. And you can eat these fresh young greens. You can eat these no problem, just like a salad green, but just be careful not to eat too many of them, because there are things in here that you really want to cook out of it if you're going to eat it. You want to cook it. You don't want to eat it raw in mass amounts. You can eat a little bit of it raw. So now let's talk about getting at some of these roots down here. We'll move some of this stuff out of the way. You can see the soil's really wet right here where this is growing. All right, so I washed this root off so you can get a better look at it. And you can see we broke the root right here while we were harvesting part of it, but it really doesn't have giant tap roots. There's a full root right there wrapped around that would be a tap root. So they're not really big, and all of these roots that are sticking out are all good medicine. Not necessarily the main root is the best medicine. Usually younger things work better than the older ones do. So this root right here would be a prime candidate for me for medicine. Maybe something like that one there and that one there. And then of course you've got the medicinal value and edibility of the rest of the plant as well. And you've got a couple separate plants there. This plant's really separate from the other one. It's growing around it. And you can also transplant these things if you want to. You can transplant these into your garden or your area so that you have medicinals if you're having problems finding things like this and your soil is conducive. These things all grow in disturbed areas, so it's not like they're difficult to grow. They grow everywhere from around creeks and streams all the way to, you know, higher, rockier soil in full sun. Most of the time I see them in sunlight. I don't see them a lot in direct shade though. But they're easy enough to grow and easy enough to transplant, I would say, for sure. Okay, real simple here. You know, if I decide that I need a laxative, I've been constipated for a few days, whatever the case may be, I'm going to clean this root up really good. I'm going to cut it off of here, just like that. Set the plant aside. And then I'm going to take this thing down to the creek and clean everything up really good. Take the skin off of it on the outside, although that's probably good medicine as well. Now once I've washed this thing and got the dirt off of it, I'm just going to come in here with the back of my knife. That's got a 90-degree spine on it and start shaving that down, just like I was processing tinder, to get all those properties opened up in there. Then I'll shave that off. And I just want to kind of thin slice this thing and rough it up, very much like I said if I were making tinder. I'm just roughing the edge of that up with a 90-degree spine on my knife to get those shavings, if you will. Just like that. One thing that you have to realize with this stuff, with using herbs as your medicine or as treatments for different ailments, is that you have to experiment a little bit yourself. And for me, you know, a decoction is always going to be more difficult to make than an infusion. It takes longer. You have to boil the water and all of that stuff. As a rule, with barks and roots, you want to use a decoction. But if I've got a fleshy root like this one that's green, that shaves very nicely into very thin shavings like this, I can probably get away with an infusion of this and get the laxative value out of it that I want without the decoction. You can always go back. You can make the infusion, don't make a whole lot of water in it, just about 4 ounces to double this amount in a bush pot. Make the infusion and try it. If it doesn't work, you can always go back and boil it and decoct it the second time around. But experiment so that you know what works for you. Okay guys, well I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School. Appreciate you joining me for another video in our series on Materia Medica, on curly dock or yellow dock. A good versatile plant, both edible and medicinal, and lots of plants that are medicinal are edible as well. A good friend of mine, Micah McLaughlin, always says, let thy food be your medicine. And I think there's something to that. I appreciate your views, I appreciate your support. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, for our business, for all our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends, and I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks guys.